title of today's message is this: Are you whole, perfect, and complete?
Yes.
Let's see. I'm using two tools. One, the book, The Inheritance of Shame, written by Peter Gaedus, and a lecture given by Brené Brown called Men, Women, and Worthiness. So the spiritual truth this morning is we are whole and perfect and complete because we are created in God's image and likeness. Image and likeness, same thing, same word. The book, The Inheritance of Shame. Peter is Canadian, grew up in Vancouver. He's currently an author and a comedian. And he fights against conversion therapy because he was a victim of it. He said he learned at a very young age that he was gay, and essentially it just caused him pain. He comes from a religious family from Eastern Europe. His mother had served time in a concentration camp in Russia. Father was orphaned as a very young child. Peter was sexually assaulted at 6 years of age in the social hall restroom of the church. Guilt. Am I right? Am I wrong? Did I make it happen? Is it my fault? I'm not sure. Did I want it? I just don't understand. The result is this internal debate of shame. A 6-year-old cannot understand the violation. And guess what? We can't understand the violation. No one understands. The pressure, the intimidation, the hiding that results from shame. See, we start to hide from the image that we were created in. His grades deteriorated, and by the time he's 14 years of age, he's sexually active, meeting men on the street, and hitchhiking. He says his brother found his porn magazines up under his mattress, and he removed them and put in a Bible. And we're sure that worked. They teach him, there's nothing like teenage teasing, right? This man's last name is Gaedus, which is easy for them to transliterate into gay dicks. It's in the book. That's what they called him. He's in Catholic school, in sex education, and they said in the final chapter, everyone is punished. He has nightmares, shame upon shame in each experience. Every message this man had from his family, his church, his school, was that he was wrong. Not that he did a wrong thing, that he was wrong. He once called the suicide line, and he identified with some of the messages. So he then went to volunteer for the suicide line, and it helped keep him together. He goes to college, he recognizes he is in despair, and so he seeks out a psychiatrist. He experiences 6 years of rebirthing therapy. The psychiatrist violated him by treating him with medications he did not need for depression and psychosis, and then he would administer ketamine, which gives you anesthesia. You forget what has happened. And the idea was for him to have a new rebirthing experience. All of this as conversion therapy for the fact that he was gay. Every message Peter received is that he was inadequate, that he was broken, that he was wrong, that he was just not enough. And it creates this conflict with our ability to recognize the beauty of the image of God that resides within us all. See, often our identification comes from the reflection we get from other people. And when we have been violated, it results in shame, and shame results in hiding. Hiding the image of God. Emotionally abused, fear resides. And where there is fear, there is separation. The Declaration of Science and Mind says, God, the living spirit, expressed through all living things. And yes, that means us. So, we're whole, we're perfect and complete. Yes, this is true, but do we feel it? We recite it, but do we feel it? The first story, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, man and woman, not necessarily proper names. Created in God's image, and the story is clear, they are not shamed. They are unashamed. Blame versus shame. Blame is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. There is something wrong with me. Defined this way, emotion that occurs when others ridicule, demean, discount, minimize the personal needs of the individual, your feelings, and your sexuality. The problem is with shame is that we believe the shame. It turns into our belief. Can you imagine the power of saying to yourself, I am worthless? There is a neurological effect from shame. It is exactly the same as trauma. It is experienced the same. We experience trauma with flight, fight, or freeze. See, neurologically, the shame experience, just like trauma, that our prefrontal cortex freezes and we have an inability to make good decisions. So as a result, three things happen. First, we don't trust ourselves anymore. We look for all the recognition outside of us rather than from inside. Second, we try to cure ourselves from being ourselves. Cure ourselves from being ourselves, as if that is possible. And third, we fail to protect ourselves, establishing bad relationships very often, or at least difficulty with them. We hide the genuine parts of ourselves to try to protect ourselves, to protect me from me. Adam and Eve, they hid themselves from God after they made a choice because they forgot the image. When we have shame, we hide, physically and emotionally. We distort the image that we are. There is self-denial and hiding. Brené Brown talks about in her lecture, Men, Women, and Worthiness, that shame is like quicksand. It is like swampland. You just continue to sink. And it shows up in all kinds of extreme ways. Sometimes narcissism, perfectionism, anger, feeling I can just not do it all, but I'm supposed to be able to do it all. I feel like an outsider. I'm just not in the clique. I am fearful and often end up deadening the pain with addiction. Shame, she says, is an inner sense of being completely diminished, to being insufficient as a person. This is self-judging of the self. A simple moment of shame can stay with us for the rest of our lives. How many of you have a traumatic story from high school? Most people do. I have a few. That a situation can rob you almost of your dignity, the humiliation, and we develop a belief in the shame. See, inwardly, the image yearns for freedom, to be authentic and to be accepted. See, it's like you need to be naked, right? Unashamed. And the bondage is when we distort the image and don't live up to our own expectations. think about the extreme messages of television, right? Thin, pretty, blonde, muscular, excessively committed to looking good. All the mirrors I have at every corner of my house. To being the hero on the football field. No fear. Don't be weak. Don't let them see you sweat. Don't be soft. See, fear can turn into rage. And the need to belong so important that we attempt to fit in. We hide ourselves yet again to fitting in. See, fitting into another person's expectation of who and what we are. But we always feel violated as a result because it's not true. But we are whole, perfect, and complete. Often this leads to judgment. You just look for the opportunity to just put someone else down in an attempt to feel better. Brené Brown says, toxic shame is thinking you're fundamentally wrong, bad, inadequate, and worthy of the rejection. See, the power is that we put the power in the belief. But remember, even though we're self-punishing ourselves and we have a belief that doesn't work for us, we can replace it with another. Shame versus blame. Blame is a focus on behavior and often can be helpful to get us to change. But shame is a focus on the person. So Peter recovers from this experience. How does he recover? Peter, a young man, joins the group. At this time, the entire patient population of this psychiatrist lives in the home of the psychiatrist. Warning, warning, warning. If you think about doing that, just don't do it. Living with the psychiatrist, they're all living together, and another young man joins with a similar problem. And the psychiatrist promises him that he will be healed. But Peter knows it's not true. Peter hasn't changed. And his compassion for this other man brings him to report the psychiatrist to the board of medicine. So what? See, I'm calling us this morning to reclaim our identity, to get away from the distorted image of God and learn to believe that we are whole, perfect, and complete just as we are. Just as we were yesterday, we are right now, and how we will be tomorrow. Accept this image that God is revealing through each one of us that is unique. It is beautiful. It is sacred. It is holy. It is our privilege to represent the image of God individually. Made in God's image. See, you don't really have to worry about fitting in. You can adjust, but don't change, don't deny, by hiding. So it's time to come out of hiding. Now, how do you do this? First of all, listen to your inner dialogue. The hidden thoughts that you have that you don't necessarily share. We have to be able to observe our thoughts so that we can change our thoughts. Putting in a new thought. 2, have some compassion for yourself or ourselves. We have to be willing to forgive ourselves and to a point to extend the forgiveness to who violated us. Because if not, we're just carrying that person around with us all the time. Identify the wound, recognize it, but understand that as the image is portrayed from within, it heals the wound, transforming our pain by compassion. So, I am sure someone is asking themselves, so why didn't God prevent this from happening? Isn't that always the question that people portray? Why didn't God prevent it? See, this is the problem if you believe that God controls people's behavior. If you believe that God controls people's behavior, then when someone's behavior is not as you expect it to be, you conclude that God does not love. That is not true at all. These people disrespected parameters. Peter was not wrong. They wronged him. Now, the interesting thing is this. The shame plays itself out generation to generation. Hiding from our godly image is a belief in separation. Now, one sacred text says this way: if God is for us, who can be against us? Including ourselves. Can anything separate us from the love of God? Can hardship, distress, death, life, persecution, famine, things going on now, things going on in the future, nakedness, war? The answer is no. Why? Because we are more than conquerors. See, we don't win God's love. We don't go to war to win God's love. We are God's love. We are God's love all the time. It's about recognizing what is true, what is principle. And if you are wrestling with the idea that, yes, but something I've done or something that has been done to me makes me unworthy of the image, I am telling you the truth. We are whole, perfect, and complete, just as we are right now. Replace the old belief that is not working with a belief that is truth. We are more than conquerors because we have been given and we portray the love of God. We do not earn it. It's not possible. It is our privilege. We are it. So are we whole, perfect, and complete? The answer is yes. Created in God's image and participating in the eternal love of God, which never changes. If your definition of God lets God's definition change to not being love, your God is entirely too weak. God eternally loves. But here's the issue. It's all about the decision to believe the truth. And we have to believe the truth before we feel it. It's about the decision. To not is to live beneath our privilege. Now, the interesting thing is how sometimes we can fight to stay in the pain, even though we want it removed. But it is time to come out of hiding. It is time for God to fully reveal itself through you as a unique creation and expression of the one God of love. Are you willing to reclaim God's image within you? Are you willing? It's not a rhetorical question. Are you willing?
Yes.
Are you willing to be and to know that you are whole, perfect, and complete?
Yes.
Say, I am whole, perfect, and complete. Let the church say amen.
Amen.
And so it is.